much, everyone, for joining us. I'm really pleased to say that, this is our 18th session in 18 weeks. So thank you so much for joining us. It's really an honor to have everyone with us in this session. Just make sure that you guys, your audio is on mute. Make sure that that is the same throughout the session. We want to make sure that you guys enjoy the session and have a good quality of audio. So please make sure that you do keep your audio on mute. You can use the chat box to communicate with us. You can put your questions in. Lee and I will go through your questions on the session. He's gonna stop me and ask to see that, how everything is on the chat box. So we're gonna go through the chat box questions when we reach to a certain section. We are recording the session, so this is a recorded session, and you can watch the recording of the session after the session as well. Just a bit of background about myself for those who are first-time joiner. My name is Susan Ismaili. I have been in financial crime and regulatory compliance for the past 14 years. Majority of my career was in Middle East. I used to live in Dubai, and I used to work there. A year ago, I moved to Canada, to Toronto, and I'm now in one of the international banks and covering their anti-bribery and corruption for Canada and Latin America. A bit of introduction about TCAE and who we are and what we do. So TCAE, or in short, which is Toronto Compliance and AML Events, I started that around 10 months ago. Basically the aim for that was to gather and centralize all the events, webinars, and courses in AML and financial crime, as well as compliance and cryptocurrencies and so many others, and put them in a centralized location so that everyone could access and go through and have accessibility, to see all those events that are happening, and specifically in Toronto, because we have so many events that are happening. Nowadays, because of the COVID and we have a lot of webinars, we're trying to capture all the events that are happening in North America and US, and even, a broader range as well, so that everyone could access that. You can also download our apps. We have a TCAE app, which you can download on your mobile phones. If you have an Apple or Android, you can feel free, to download and use that as well. So around 18 weeks ago, I started this initiative to ask some of the subject matter experts and the industry gurus, to join us and share their knowledge and experience with us. We had amazing speakers, lineup speakers, who they volunteered their time and they helped us sharing their knowledge and experience. It has been an overwhelming experience for me, and I'm sure that it has been for many of you. So you have been through this journey. Many of you have been in more than 5 sessions so far. So I'm hoping that, you have enjoyed, and the amount of experience and amount of information that we are sharing in these sessions are really amazing. So with that, I want to introduce you to our this week's guest speaker. Lee has been with us, or being my mentor, for the past 5 years. I met him in UK when we were doing a project, and he was my mentor, and he basically trained me. We were working on a project to become a faculty member of one of the top tier international banks, and become their official trainers. And he was the person who basically walked us through the journey and hold our hands. And I think me and Glenna were his students, and we learned so much through that 1 week journey that we had in UK with him. So I'm really pleased to introduce you to him. He is an amazing trainer, mentor, and I I want this session. I want him, to be in this session because I know how much information you're gonna gain from him.
And there was no one else left. Let's be honest, Suzanne. There was no one else left. You had 18 speakers, and finally you said, "Would you pop along?"
Yeah, something like that. And you're gonna enjoy his British humor all along the session. So yeah, so with that, I'm gonna hand the floor to you, Lee, and yeah, please let us know more about you, and yeah, welcome to the session.
Well, thank you very much, and greetings, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, it's delighted to be. It's Saturday afternoon here in the UK. If I wasn't doing this, I'd have to do the lawns, or I'd do my chores in the house. So this was an opportunity to get out of that. And Suzanne did come in and said, "Look, there's no one else, and you're free. Would you come and talk to my disciples, these very important people, about the subject of politically exposed person risk?" Genuinely delighted to be here, see some old friends on the chat there. For those who have not met me before, I'll make it very brief because we've got only a short passage of time, and Suzanne's used all of that time with promoting her compliance forum. So what we're going to say is very quickly this. I've been in financial services a very long time, over 30 years, mostly in the UK. I support risk professionals around the world. I was formerly the global head of education for the ICT. I support ACAMs in Europe, but I cut my teeth as an MLO for a Nigerian bank called Access Bank. So for my Nigerian friends out there, good afternoon. I have a huge affinity with Nigeria and some of the issues that we manage there and around other parts of the world. And that's why I've chosen this subject. Genuinely, seriously now, I've chosen the subject of politically exposed people in particular. And I'm going to run you through a case study, which I think is absolutely fantastic. As I do so, I think it's really, we've not met before. And there's something you should know about me, if you haven't already get it, is I do like engagement. I'm a facilitator, I'm not a lecturer. But given we're in this virtual environment, there is a degree of tell about what I'm going to do here. But please engage. Ask questions whenever you feel the need to do so. Suzanne has got the permission to interrupt me. In fact, after 5 years of knowing one another, she interrupts me a lot, often telling me off, and that's fine. I'm welcome. I invite that. So if you've got a question, ask the question. Don't wait to the end, because the probability is we run out of time. But any questions that we don't have the opportunity to answer on air, then we'll sweep them up after the event, and Suzanne will do something special with that. So we're going to have a couple of polling questions to get your views on things and what you understand by situations. Keep yourself on mute for no other reason that you may, like myself, have dances with wolves scenario going in the background with dogs howling and children at home. We live on changed times, don't we? It's the new normal. It is being videoed. I'm acutely aware of the fact that every time I lean forward, my massive potato head could become quite menacing. So I'm doing my best to step back. If I step forward, I'm already going to give you a disclaimer. I apologize for scaring you and anyone else watching, but it is the way we are. Right, risk. There is a disclaimer on here that says, we're going to look at a scenario and allegations of suggested inappropriate conduct. There's no suggestion on my side that this person is guilty. I have to make that statement because it's necessary. Innocent till proven guilty. I'm going to allow you to make and draw your own conclusion after we've walked through the material. But when we talk about risk, and in particular politically exposed risk and PEPs, and I am going to use the term PEPs for brevity, I want to make a statement right from the beginning. Is being a PEP, you're not a criminal by default. Being successful and or wealthy is not a crime. What we're really concerned when we talk about politically exposed risks is to identify those persons, male or female, who take advantage of their opportunity, their position. Actually, when you talk and think about the statement politically exposed person, it's probably a misnomer. I much prefer the Citibank version, which said senior public figure, because the category of PEPs is far broader than just people in the political parties. You have judges, admirals, members of the army. It's quite diverse. In the absence of a universal statement of who's a PEP, it's really anyone in high public office who could misappropriate either the funds that they have oversight of, or else they take advantage of their position and enter into nepotism, cronyism. Really important point at this point is to actually draw attention to is the difference between bribery and corruption. They are quite different. Ultimately both crimes, but they're different. If I bribe you, I offer you an advantage for improper performance of your role and responsibility. I may solicit it, that's also a crime. With corruption, grand corruption, political corruption, I don't offer anything or solicit anything. I just abuse my position of power. So bribery and corruption, they're different, but they tend to get gelled together, and we tend to focus on people of senior public office as being persons that we're interested in. Now, it's not a new risk, and this is where my frustration lies with this management of PEPs and how we are, and our relative success. You know, the subject of PEPs really starts to emerge after the 1970s, when you get globalization in emerging markets. And then you get technology like the internet that enables people to move their money at lightning speed around the world. If I'm in a position of high public office in one jurisdiction, and I take advantage of that and put my hand in the till, so to speak, and take the coffers, I can now, through wire transfers, the SWIFT devices, move money around the world. Previously, that wasn't possible, or it certainly was quite difficult. So the subject of a politically exposed person, or PEP risk, really emerges in the 1990s with the internet. We see the likes of Sani Abacha, just a small matter of $5 billion he took advantage in 4 years of presidency in Nigeria. In the 2000s, there is a reaction, and then we get the United Nations Convention Against Corruption in 2003, and then we start to see the Bribery Act in the UK. In 2011, by way of a chronological unwrapping of the subject, is an outstanding document which you may not have seen called the Puppet Master. It's provided by the World Bank as part of the STAR project. It is 100 grand corruption cases. That's 2011. Today, recently, this year, I'm seeing headlines about, the House Speaker in Ohio in the USA, who's the subject of allegations. We've got in the UK a housing secretary who may or may not be involved in housing irregularities. In Canada, Trudeau himself and some of the persons working with, I understand, were subject to allegations of impropriety and meddling with affairs to do with some businesses. This is not an African issue. This is not an Asian or an Indian issue. This is a global issue, is my point. And it has grown, and it's not going to go away. So I'm hoping in what we're going to go through now is going to share some light in actually what does this look like? Because so often with training and education and even policies, we talk in an abstract fashion. It's something that may happen. It's someone else's problem. It couldn't happen in Toronto. It couldn't happen in the UK. Well, yes, it does. But what does it look like? This case study is outstanding because I'm going to, in the next 40 minutes, and no more than that, unwrap and show you what a case study looks like. So, issue all around. Here's your first poll session. And Suzanne Tinkerbell is going to hopefully open up a poll because I'm going to show you 6 faces. Not yet, Suzanne. Not yet. You went too soon. I was teasing. There's 6 ladies on your screen. One of them is allegedly behind a multi-billion-dollar fraud and corruption case. Have a good look. They're all smiley. They're all beautiful in their own way. 1, 2, 3, or 4. I want you to pick a number because now, Suzanne, do it. Now, Suzanne is going to launch the poll and you are going to select which person you think is the alleged criminal. So as quick as you like. And if nothing else, just to tell me there is someone out there still listening. You haven't all turned off already. Make a poll. So we've shared the poll. You are going to vote. Are they voting, Suzanne? Suzanne?
Yes,
are they voting?
are. Yes,
They are voting. And do we have a front runner?
Yes, somehow. Yeah.
Yes,
It's kind of,
somehow.
it's a tie.
It's a tie. You could
Yeah.
do this a little bit like, you know, the racing they do. You could call it like that. I don't want to put you under any pressure here.
Yeah, I'm gonna give another 5 seconds. Okay,
I
here we
mean,
go.
seemingly they're all.
Okay, we have a runner. Okay, good.
Do we have a front runner? You're going to share the results. What have we got? Well, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Now, if we had more time, I would indulge you by asking you why you selected your individual choices. Regrettably, we don't have too much time in this session. How about if I told you, though, just to throw a bit in the mix, 5 of those people do not exist. What did he just say? That's right. 5 of those people you can see there do not exist. I created them with artificial intelligence. Only one of those people is a true person. We, in customer due diligence, rely on what we're presented. Often we make a decision based upon what we're presented with. But 5 of those people are fraud. And they're fraud because they don't exist. The person you really want is number 6. So if you did number 6, that's a 25%. That means 75% were duped by my cunning plan. Number 6 is the correct answer. Obviously, 25% you will win a prize. Suzanne will forward that in due course. It's probably a motorhome, a holiday for the family, or a small gift, $1,000 plus. It's amazing what you can do with money.
Yeah.
But number 6 is the lady we really wanted. Who is she, though? And do you know her name? So on chat for me, can you pop in who you think it is? She was born in Azerbaijan oil town. It's Azerbaijan today, but it used to be Russia. She was born in, so Baku was formerly in Russia. She's got a Russian mother. Actually, she's got a Russian passport at the moment, it's suggested, and she may seek refuge in Russia. That's relevant, but it was formerly Russia, now Azerbaijan. She became head of the oil company in this jurisdiction. She's a multi-millionaire, allegedly Africa's wealthiest female, certainly the youngest in one of the poorest countries on earth. 2013, she was named in the Forbes billionaire list. Who is she? What we got going on in chat?
I guess we have a lot of people are guessing it right. Lee.
Fantastic. And Kayla is asking Sharon, how did she know? I don't know. It's just one of those things, isn't it? It's a lucky guess, isn't it, Sharon? Well done. It is Isabel dos Santos. If you've not read about this lady, what I'm going to wrap you was wonderfully revealed by a group called OCCRP and ICIJ. ICIJ is a group of investigative journalists. They have got hold of circa 700,000 documents that have been leaked, stolen information, if you will. And they've investigated, they've forensically analysed it, and they built a story. I'm going to share that story with you. But richest lady, UK resident, now in Dubai, where she has property, Russian heritage. She's denied all the allegations. That's her right until they're proven, of course. So that's where it's important, the disclaimer. We're not suggesting she is a criminal. But certainly a conduct based upon that disclosure, but if you chose to believe it, is quite interesting. Unfortunately, aside from the billions of dollars that appear to have been misappropriated from Angola, there is the human collateral. Quite aside from the people of Angola who've been deprived housing, sanitation, infrastructure, education. We've also got, more recently in January, her banker who committed suicide almost the day after allegations were reported by the BBC. So there's certainly a seriousness to this. And so notwithstanding the light manner in which I'm delivering this is a human tragedy. This is a true human tragedy, this case. So let's have a look at it. Let's unwrap the stallers. And I'm going to give you the pillars of success, if you wish to call that. I'm talking success if you were a corrupt official. How do you do it? So her father becomes president of Angola in 1979. Angola was one of the last African states to get independence in 1975. The first president died. Her father takes over. Question. How do we define that risk straight away? So if you're having to prescribe policies and procedures, if you're having in your customer due diligence to define the risk here, what would we call that risk? And it's a fairly easy question. He died of natural causes, Sharon, allegedly. Thank you for the question. Okay, so Joseph's gone for corruption, but PEP by associate. Yeah, she's a PEP by family association. The PEP is the higher risk character. The senior public figure is the person who can do good or bad. If they choose to go down the evil side, then the probability is, given that the world is looking for them, that they will hand off the opportunity and the corruption and the wealth that they generate to people they trust. So you have a PEP risk, and then there's the PEP by association, because simply, and to put it very simply, if you have a Christmas turkey, who sits around and eats it with you? It's your family, it's the people you care for. They're the people you trust. PEP by association is who shares the turkey. In this case, the turkey is several $1 billion. So she is the daughter of the PEP. It's not a crime to be the daughter of a PEP unless the PEP goes rogue. So the first seeds are sown. He becomes president. And then in 1992, he does something that's very interesting. He changes the constitution of Angola. And he actually prescribes that the president could not be prosecuted for any official actions. Now, there would be outcry if that was brought in as a main rule. So what he adds is, except in the event of bribery or treason to the motherland. So, second question, is that a positive change? Is changing the law to say the president can be prosecuted or can't be prosecuted except for treason and bribery, is that a positive step or not? What's the risk here, is my question. What could go wrong?
So we have a polling question for polling answer.
Okay.
The answers.
So it's a simple yes or no, because we haven't got time for 180, 200 people to yes or no. Is this, in your view, a positive change? Yes or no, please?
Okay, we're going to
Now, some of you may not be able to do the polling because of the technical position you're in. So if you're not able to do that, you can still play along, go through the chat, which is outstanding, and thank you. On chat, at least, Suzanne, it seems to be there's not a lot of confidence that this is a positive change.
Yeah, I could see on the polling as well. So let's see the result.
Well, that seems a shame, doesn't it? I mean, on the face of it, he says, I can be prosecuted for bribery. But what's the issue? The issue is he can't be tried for corruption. It's a different form of offence. Do you remember I said at the beginning, you have to distinguish between bribery and corruption. They are different offences. He cannot accept a bribe. He cannot offer a bribe. But it does not stop him taking abuse and abusing his position of power. And therein the seeds of this story are laid, in my opinion, going back way back to 1992. There is a whole legacy to this, and it builds. Now, the relevance of this is if you're doing due diligence of a politically exposed person, it is so much more than a checklist of ID, payslip, bank statements. It's the whole geographical, political, social information that you can draw to say, it is a senior public figure. Is there an opportunity to take abusive position? Is the rule of law in place that's sufficient to constrain this person's activities? Seeds are laid. This is the story. Pillar 1, 1999, the president, the father, sets up Anglo Salincor. It has an exclusive license to market diamonds in Angola. Behind oil, this is the number 2 export in terms of revenue. Now, he's got to award the contract to somebody, but actually it goes to a company where his daughter and her mother, his ex-wife, have got a share of 24.5%. Here's my question. I thought it was interesting it was 24.5%. Is this bribery and bribery? Is this treason in terms of an offence? And why 24.5%? Now, we don't have a poll on this one, so you can chat. Is it bribery or treason is the first question. And my second question, if you prefer to answer that one, is why have they selected 24.5%? There is method in their madness because it's a fairly arbitrary. So Glenn has gone 25% with Sharon, and so's Mohit, which is outstanding. When you look at the mechanics of this corruption, it's not treason, it's not bribery. They have given themselves a level of beneficial interest that falls below the global standard of 25% that we are mandated to check at. In the same way, someone who's smuggling cash and banking cash below the thresholds in the USA smurfs their cash, puts it into small parcels, that what they've effectively done here is gone under the 24, because when you ask the question, do you have 25% ownership? The honest answer is, no, I don't. But 24.5% is still a significant controlling interest. And therefore, when we look at the definition of a PEP, it is more than just being the person. And when we look at the risk of a beneficial interest, it is more than just the threshold of 25%. You look at the holistic makeup of that business. Is it in receipt of government contracts? Yes, it is. Is there anyone from the father, who's the president, part of that business? Yes, there is, his daughter and his wife. Those are red flag indicators straight away. It's also why when we're classifying PEP risk, we don't just look at private individuals, we look at legal entities and legal arrangements. If you have a PEP, a senior public figure, who has a controlling interest or a controlling mind of that business, you have to consider, do we think that's sufficiently concerning that that entity should itself be considered PEP entity risk? So you may not always reach that because they're removed and they can't affect executive management decisions. But in this case, she's very active. She is very active in this business. So beneficial interest 24.5%, very interesting. That's 1999. A year later, the father then, remember I said about the dates, about technology, globalization. In 2000, they are awarding one of the country's first telecommunications licenses. This is going to be massively lucrative. Actually, retrospectively, they gave more than $5 billion cash dividends to this business subsequent to its incorporation. So this is a big deal, this license. It was awarded to a business. Guess who owns the business? His daughter. So she has, in the space of almost 2 years now, benefited from her father allocating contracts in respect to diamonds and one of the first mobile communication licenses. That is a massive opportunity. Massive opportunity. And you can do good deeds with that, or you can do poor things with it. Now, people of senior public office inevitably schmooze, and people schmooze them, and people like to be associated with them. What grows here are various relationships of senior, important people, white-collar professionals. But the reference to white collar is simply historically when you worked in the city of London or any other thing, you wore a white shirt. It was a white-collar professional. But she is introduced to one of the richest and the most influential people in Portugal. He's a billionaire already. He doesn't require her wealth, but what he can do because of his influence is enable decisions and access to business and to further instruments, shall we call them, that will enable her allegedly to move billions of dollars around the world. What do we call this person? What do we call these intermediaries in our risk assessments at work? We're talking a little bit more about money laundering here. We've strayed into money laundering and away from PEP. What do you call these, these accountants, estate agents? How do we recognize them in our policies and procedures?
We have a question from Mansha. She is asking that in that case, when you were talking about the threshold, in that case, do you advise that threshold should be revised and add more parameters to it?
Okay, it's a great question. You're on this call because you have a passion to fight crime, or else you're avoiding the household chores like me, you're driven to it. But the truth is you're on it because you want to make a difference. So let me throw the question back at you. What do you think you should do in the light of this experience in this case study? Because you've answered the question yourself already. You know that when we fix our maths to 25%, that the criminals, and by the way, don't we publicize all our policies and procedures through FATF? We tell them 5 years before we implement them what we're about to do. They know what we're going to do, so they change. If you only work at 25%, you will miss the trick. It is so simple to evade that control. A lot of big businesses for higher risk customers have a 10% threshold. That's simply a legacy from FATCA when everybody initially thought it was going to be 10%. But a lot of businesses do work at 10%. I know businesses that will go below 10%. If it's important, if the circumstances around that risk are such that a number itself is not indicative of the totality of the risk.
Yeah.
So the short answer is yes, you should.
I remember our regulator didn't put any threshold because they want us to do the risk assessment. And based on the whole situation that you get, there wasn't a specific threshold. And we were asking, okay, do you have a specific threshold? And they were like, no, we don't impose a specific threshold because we want you to do the assessment yourself and come to a conclusion based on the holistic view. And then you put a threshold.
Exactly right. You have to have the autonomy. We have to have certain thresholds to help us with our transaction monitoring, and because of the production nature of our businesses. But ultimately, as a financial crime professional, you've got to look at the holistic risk. Don't be blinded by the numbers. So the answer is no. Why is this a high risk relationship, and what do we call them? Thank you for the contributions on chat there. Hopefully you got something like this. It's a gatekeeper. I mentioned white collar worker, professional enablers, non-financial service providers, and they're often regulated professionals. These are people we can, in many jurisdictions, place reliance on to do the customer due diligence. If you get a rogue gatekeeper, then that is our worst nightmare come true. It has our worst nightmare come true. So we have contracts being awarded to the daughter of the president. We have vast sums of cash being generated and wealth being generated that could be plowed back into the jurisdiction of Angola and help them. We've got intermediaries now who will act as just that, an intermediary. You know, if you are a financial crime professional, and I mean that in the sense of a money launderer, right? If you are a criminal who does this for a living, you want to keep your name out the headlines. You need an intermediary, someone you can hand off. It might be an informal nominee, which is your family, your brother, your sister, or it might be a formal nominee in the sense of a legal agreement that's put in place with the gatekeeper, like an estate agent, accountant, etc. But she has the ingredients now to move vast sums of money and not in her name, if she chooses to do so. So what is the next step that we need to consider here and add to our money laundering scheme? If you were a money launderer, if you're a corrupt official, because I'm looking for you, aren't I? I'm looking for you on my world check database. And I'm looking on there and I'm hoping for adverse media. What am I going to do? Okay. So the answer to the question I'm looking for is, you go on holiday. No, you don't go on holiday. Actually, you might go on holiday. What you do is you set up shell companies. Here's the trivia question. Where in the world is this? Where in the world is this? It could be Suzanne's private island just off Necker. It could be.
Yeah.
It could be where Glenna lives. Glenna's looks like that, doesn't it? Who said crime doesn't pay, Suzanne? It's Mauritius. Mauritius. I will set up shell companies, front companies, with relative ease, remotely, using nominees for a fee, an acceptable fee, because I'm a multi-millionaire now. And I will set up companies there in sometimes havens of secrecy. Sometimes they also have tax advantages. What Isabel dos Santos is alleged to have done is set up more than 400 companies and subsidiaries around the world in 41 different countries. And 94 of them are considered to have a high degree of secrecy. And one of her favored destinations are Malta and Mauritius. Hong Kong's in there, Dubai's in there, but mostly jurisdictions that have fairly immature AML controls. On the corruption index from Transparency International, they'll perform particularly poorly. But it's more about the incorporation services they offer. Why does someone who's living in Angola need 400 companies around the world? Is my honest question. Why is that necessary? Because they're a multinational, international business lady, maybe. Maybe they just grow their awareness, the opportunities of setting up businesses and how easy it is, and they just do one after the other. Or could it be that you're setting a complex layer of businesses in place to confuse and delay and frustrate your customer due diligence procedures? You make your own mind up as to why you would need 400. I think it's odd. But there's still more you need to do here. There's still more you need to do. Because how are you going to move, and I'm going to show you a transaction of 38 million. How are you going to use explain a transaction going from Angola out to these shell companies around the world? So on chat, please, I'm genuinely interested on what rationale you're going to place on how you're going to explain it, because your filters, whether through value, risk assessment, jurisdiction, are going to stop a lot of these payments. So what are you going to do it? So she is layering the money. So for those of you who are, why is she doing it? It's absolutely true. She is layering the money, potentially, allegedly. But my question is, when it stopped, when the relationship manager phones up and says, hi, why are you moving 38 million? What's the explanation going to be? Because it's going to have to be a good one. Okay, so Manika's gone with charities and donations. I really like that, because it's very difficult to interfere with a payment to orphan children, starving children, for example. So that's where charities, particularly for terrorism, are particularly high risk historically. So I like that idea. But a donation of 38 million, maybe if you're Bill Gates and you're particularly philanthropic, fine. But at this moment in time, she's growing her wealth. Okay, what else have we got? For tax benefits, Samantha, absolutely right. I have a legitimate right to take advantage of tax arbitrage around the world if I can afford to have an accountant who points me in the right direction. So that would be acceptable. So you can invest in NGOs. Okay, fine. Payment of services. Adebayo, I'm going to ask you the question, what type of services would you be paying for? Because that's my follow-up question as relationship manager, certainly as a financial crime professional. Real estate. So Sandra's gone for real estate. I like that a great deal. You will see an example shortly in Monaco in the UK, property of about 55 million. You can buy a very nice piece of real estate in parts of the world that are expensive. You can move a vast sum of money with one transaction. And everybody, by the way, who's involved in that deal is prepared to turn a blind eye because we're on massive fees. Nobody wants to stop that one. I like that one. A loan, Vivek, you have wisdom beyond your years with that one. I make you a loan. So Vivek said loan. Let me explain the situation of commercial loan very simply and quickly. Two businesses. I need some finance. Capital's running a bit short. Would you lend me some money? Yes, of course. When we enter into a legal agreement, there's a presumption that I'm going to pay it back. But if you're two criminally collusive partners, you're never going to pay it back. Now, that's quite a difficult one. I do recall seeing a substantial transaction of this nature from my banking days. And the money, interesting enough, came from Canada. Canada was low risk, the value in, a loan between businesses. It passed the sniff test at that time. Now, of course, the repayment of that loan may be deferred for several months and years. unless you've got really sophisticated and robust due diligence procedures, the people who approved the transaction at that time may have left the business, moved on. And so that the new people, the new joiners, aren't expecting the repayment to happen. So you do need, when you're managing PEPs, senior public figures, robust record keeping, because you may not be on the bridge when that ship leaves port and we're looking at the case. Others in there which are really good, expanding your business, you might be investing in opportunities, that's completely plausible. Antiques and artwork, well, if you did that nowadays, Mancha, you're going to get a great deal of enhanced due diligence checks, because that is now completely high risk activity. So you could do that, and you can spend about 400 million on an art, can't you? We saw that happening with the lady pointing her finger of suspicion. I think we've got some great ideas there. We've got some luxury ideas. So I'm going to move on, but that's now you're thinking, and most of those are plausible. Let's see what she did. Well, they did use loans and contracts to companies. What they were doing was using these shell companies, which were hastily arranged and set up, sometimes with nominee directors, sometime in the name of her husband, sometime in the name of the gentleman in Portugal and others, her trusted aides. They would loan money between businesses, astonishing levels of loans. She did buy the apartment for 55 million in Monte Carlo. That's probably a 2-bedroom, 2 up, 2 down in Monte Carlo. But you can launder a lot of money and you get the asset appreciation. Of course, you can live in it, which is rather nice. They invested in other businesses. So if you said invest in other businesses, that's what she did. Actually, the diamond business, of which she had a share, invested in a Swiss jewelers, which is very well known, wasn't doing particularly well, losing money, they take over. When you look at the actual transactions of that, it was astonishing. Her husband made a personal contribution as part of the acquisition. He was rewarded by the diamond company with a fee that exceeded the amount he just invested into the business. So he's actually rewarded and paid back what he'd invested. The diamond business in Angola now owes about $200 million, it's alleged, because that jeweler went out of business. Astonishing abuse and misuse, it's alleged, of Angolan assets. And of course, you need a yacht, particularly if you're in Monte Carlo. We don't just buy a dinghy, we buy a $35 million yacht. This is in 2016. This is the president's daughter in a jurisdiction, one of the poorest in the world. And rarely do I get emotive about a subject, but what we're seeing here, if it's true, and all the documents are in, is a disgusting abuse of power to the detriment of people of Angola. This is not abstract, this is real people. And the loans that were passing between businesses appear to have been signed by Dos Santos in her position as both a borrower and a lender between companies. Is that not a red flag? Is that not high risk activity when shell companies are passing business between themselves? It's astonishing, but it's still not enough, because in 2012, banks like Citigroup and Barclays and Santander and ING start to get uneasy with the situation. 2012 coincides with the HSBC fine, 1.9 billion, banks up their game. They're starting to get difficulty in moving their assets through the businesses and the companies. So what do you do if you are Isabel Dos Santos? And let's assume that you are laundering and moving money. What you do is you get your own bank. And that's what she does. She becomes part owner, co-owner of 2 banks in Angola and in Portugal. Now, the beauty of that is that I can now move money outside of bank scrutiny. I am the controller of the banks. It may appear subsequently from the Portuguese bank into the mainstream banking network, but it disguises the Angolan origination, which might have led a path for someone due diligence to her door. I think this is outstanding. This is the 5th ingredient pillar in her success, if this was success. Now, in 2012, I hinted that there was started to be a great deal of adverse media. 2013, Forbes said, this doesn't look right. Everything she's got is being given to her father. This is bribery and corruption. This is 7 years ago. What would your response be if you're Isabel dos Santos? You are a multi-millionaire and Forbes has just inferred that you're a criminal in 2013. What would you do with all that wealth, all that money? Well, she knows that you're going to be searching her. She knows you're going to be looking at adverse media. So she employs a PR company whose responsibility is to provide online reputation management and story selling. What PEPs can do is fill the first 2 pages of Google with good news stories, charitable events, speeches and London Business School in London. To all intents and purposes, they're rather hoping you don't have either A, adverse media technology, or B, if you're doing your open source intelligence, you never go beyond page 2. This isn't new. If you go to a document in 2016 from Transparency International called Paradise Lost, it's about the UK. And it drew attention 4 years ago to how senior public figures, oligarchs in particular, from Russia, were paying vast sums of money to counter adverse media with positive media. So when you're doing your scrutiny of PEPs, don't be surprised if the first 2 pages are full of great news. You got to go to page 3, 4, 5. You got to get beyond that. You've got to add the words fraud, money laundering to your name searches. You've got to become more forensic, because this is Tom and Jerry for adults. It's a cat and mouse. They know what we do. They know how we do it. And if you have got the money, you can afford some significant good news. It's effectively laundering your reputation when you think about that concept. I've got a bad reputation. I'm going to launder it and make it look clean. And I love that analogy. So pillar 6 was, until recently, and until it all wrapped, we didn't know how bad it was. End of the story was her father appoints her at the Sonagal board, the #1 source of revenue in Angola, access to $14 billion. There was some concern, understandably, in Angola about that, but he's the president still. But he then leaves after 35 years of office, and the new man takes over, a fresh brush. He dismisses her for office. Here's something that's interesting based upon the documents. She was fired at 1:30. She's no longer the president of that business. 5 hours later, she moves $38 million on her instruction from Portugal, the bank account in Portugal, to a shell company in Dubai. And the basis for that was consultancy fees. She was not the president of Sonagal. 5 hours later, she moves 38 million in respect to consultancy, back and future-based. And that is the final action in the papers. Now, if you were being a little bit cynical, you might see that that's flight money. She has awarded over 135 million in consultancy fees, most of them going to Dubai. That is a staggering sum of money, however good you are. And Forbes carried Oland's piece of work there, which was very early, not new, 7 years old. The world has missed this one. It says, best we can trace, every major Angolan investment held by her stems from her father or from taking a chunk of a company when he awarded the contract to an external group. Okay, here's the risks, the summary. We have got so many in here, it's obscene. We've got abuse and corruption by the head of state, allegedly. We've got nepotism, cronyism. We've got contracts being awarded for state monopolies. We've seen that in other jurisdictions of the world. It's not unique to Angola. The use of shell companies in tax havens and havens of secrecy. We've got intermediaries like accountants and bankers and middlemen, giving me that absence, that extended loan. And the rationale for them, loans, consultancy fees. And we've even got a correspondent bank aspect here that just muddies the waters and made it even more difficult to spot, certainly from 2013 onwards. So, Suzanne, I'm mindful of the clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my rapid run through
That's
of
awesome.
the president's daughter.
That's
And
really
I'm not inferring she's guilty. I will allow you to draw your own conclusion.
Thanks a lot, Lee. It was very informative. I could see on the chat that everyone is saying that we need more session of these. Very informative, and they have been enjoying it. So thanks a lot, Lee, for sharing the light.
Well, it's just one view, isn't it? I mean, that's the point of our role and responsibility. You're innocent until proven guilty. But what we can do when we're trying to explain to our businesses why PEP management is important, we can draw attention to what it really looks like. And that's the disconnect. A lot of people understand PEP risk and what the policies and the laws say. We just don't see it until it's too late, is the frustration.
True.
And that's the challenge. That's the opportunity. Because it's the people of Angola who suffered it.
Absolutely. It's always the bigger picture, Lee. That's what we always, our responsibility is not just looking at the paper, and we have to read between the lines. And that's, I think that this is a huge responsibility that we have to carry, and we have to keep that in mind. It's just, we shouldn't just look at it as a job when we are dealing with all this information. We have to look at it as a responsibility that it's on our shoulder, and we have to take it very seriously.
Suzanne, I have a little ditty, and I passionately believe this. When we do our jobs well, we influence people's lives and we save lives. Now, I know you've had a session from Glenna recently on human trafficking. Sometimes it's clearly tangible. Sometimes it's more discreet. Financial crime compliance is not about compliance with laws. It's about influencing and disrupting crime and terrorism and helping people. And that might be your family, your sons, your daughters. And I think bribery and corruption, like we see with one MDB right now, the people in Malaysia are waiting for their housing and infrastructure because someone thought it would be really clever to launch themselves around the world as a celebrity and spend the money. It's disgusting.
Absolutely.
And that's our opportunity. That's why we do what we do.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. So just let's go to some of the questions. If you guys have any final questions that you like to pose to Lee, happy to do so. I have a couple of questions, Lee, for you.
Are they hard ones?
I don't know. Maybe you want to run away.
Where's the dogs when you need them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is always a discussion about, we always say once a PEP is always a PEP. Is that true?
I personally I have a concern with that statement because we're forgetting what the point is. A PEP isn't a criminal. A PEP is a person of senior public office. They leave office sometimes. And sometimes they go and live in the woods and they don't have a mobile phone and they talk to bears. There are no risks to anybody when that happens. And that's a fairly extreme example. I think what happens with PEP management, we have to be sensible. If the person leaves office, if they're still an influencer, like Tony Blair, for example, who we always draw attention to, who still wants to be part of it, then he remains high risk. I also think the misnomer of a PEP is misleading as well. I think we get caught out on definitions. The fact of the matter is, are they high risk? That's the better question. If they're high risk, I don't care whether you call them PEPs or senior public figures. You manage them diligently and closely. So are they always a PEP? I don't care. Are they high risk? If they are, you manage them high risk. And if they're not, you get approval from the person who said they were high risk to say, I agree. That's the important procedural piece.
Right. And what about the, is it the same thing when it comes to the family, relatives, and associates of PEP? Should we treat them as PEP as
so,
for...
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting one. Before 2015, in the UK, I would have said, well, you treat them the same. But we have a law in the UK that says the moment the PEP leaves office, you have to take their family off the PEP list, because the UK politicians do not like that inquiry. So here in the UK, there is a law that says you have to remove them immediately. But I would remove them off the PEP list and put them on my senior public figure list, because the law doesn't actually prohibit that. And I'd manage them just the same if I thought they were high risk. Go back to the turkey. If you sit around my turkey and you share my turkey, I trust you and I care about you. And hopefully that's reciprocated enough for me to have the confidence to give you my money to look after. The money will materialize later on. I'm not daft enough to put it in my name. I put it in my daughter's name. So your family, you keep an eye on it.
Yeah, makes sense. One more question. To what degree of PEP relatives usually the FIs will conduct due diligence?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
To what degree of PEP relation, sorry, let me mute Bob. To what degree of PEP relatives usually the FIs will conduct due diligence? So,
okay, so
yeah.
At what level? How far do you go?
Yeah.
If you're the royal family, there's about 6,000 people in the royal family in the UK. There is a limit to how far you'll consider that close nexus. FATF say it's up, mum and dad, down, children. Interestingly, they forget siblings. So I don't know if it's a drafting issue or what, but they don't reference brother and sister. I think you go as far as you need to based upon the cultural affinity. I think culture is a big determinant of how far you go with family. You know, I certainly, you look at the UK, we're fairly disparate people. We're spread out all over the cities of the world. If your PEP is in a community that's very close, stays together, there's obvious close relationships there that continue, then you might extend the risk of the family. In the first instance, it's up, down, left and right and down. Certainly the FCA in the UK say you go as far as you think it's appropriate because of the risk-based approach. Again, don't get defined by a law says 25%. Don't get defined because it says brother, sister, father. If actually that person has a real close affinity with an uncle, an auntie, a stepmother, you can go as far as long as required. We are guided somewhat by social media and of course the software technology databases.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Do you believe the COVID influenced on the behavior of PEPs recently?
What a great question. I think that wherever there's disturbance, wherever there's chaos, wherever there's panic, people at a government level may act in a fairly unforensic way. And what I mean by that is they end up awarding contracts to people who shouldn't have got the contract because they panicked. I'm aware of a case at the moment I'm looking at, 250 million from the UK awarded to a company in the Mauritius Islands. It would appear they have no background or competence in providing the PPE for COVID. So my honest answer is, if I'm a good PEP, it makes no difference. If I'm not a good PEP, then there's sufficient fog for me to do something that I can attribute to, I just panicked, when actually it's clear manipulation of the situation and it's corruption. I think we will see a lot of corruption because let's not forget, back to the Tom and Jerry, you know, for every good PEP, there's a bad PEP and there's a criminal waiting to help them. So I think we are regrettably going to see a lot of money that's been misappropriated. And over the next 3, 4, 5 years, that will become more apparent. Chaos, disorder are the ingredients for a PEP to potentially misappropriate money through trade agreements.
Right. I think the last question, and we are gonna leave the session
before the meter runs out.
Yeah. Yeah. We usually do an adverse search with a string, but it's shocking that the PR can change any negative information. So is doing adverse and sanction search go in vain?
Hey, look, we are obliged to do everything reasonably possible within our roles and responsibilities. We would love to have AI, big data available to every business. It just isn't going to happen because of the money we have or haven't got, the resources. The risk-based approach says you do everything reasonably possible you can do. Now, if you're a business who is able to afford technology, and if that technology may not have been vetted by a regulator, but there's common awareness that it's used and it's reliable, and it doesn't pop up on there, that's regrettable. If you see something that you think it should have caught and the technology is spotting, you do have a responsibility to step into that gap, fill the void, and do the extra. I think the technology we've got is helpful. The fuzzy logic that's applied is helpful. And regrettably, it creates far too many false positives from a sanctions perspective, at least. But the problem we're caught with, it's a crime, if you're dealing with just sanctions here, it's a crime to make the service available to them. And if we only allow one transaction to go through, and that finances the creation of a bomb, and it's let off in a pop concert with 5,000 13-year-old children, I don't want that on my conscience. So as a financial crime professional, we do everything we can, and sometimes. Is it enough? Yeah, it is most of the time, but sometimes it gets through. But we are dealing with trillions of transactions, and the criminals are bright and they're smart. So it's a constantly moving feast. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Awesome. Okay, we're on the top of the hour, and we went a bit on top as well. So thank you so much. I know that everyone might have a lot of other questions, so please feel free to reach out either to me or Lee if you have any questions, and we can definitely come back to you with an answer. Make sure that you guys are connected with Lee. Lee, can you go to the next slide so everyone could see your connecting?
A bit of shameless self-promotion, is that what you're referring to? Thank you.
No, it's not self-promotion. It's about, connecting with you, and make sure that you guys follow the Great Chatwell Academy. They have amazing information there, and they come up with a lot of newsletters that you can feel beneficial, to get to know. Make sure that you follow Lee. He is also amazing, and he shares a lot of information there. So with that, I want to thank you all for attending. It was a great session. Thank you so much, Lee, for taking the time. It was an enjoyable, entertaining, and fun session. And thank you so much for your time and for sharing all the insights with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been emotional, Suzanne. It's been emotional.
It has been. It has been. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining.
Take care.
I'll see you hopefully next week.
Take care out there.
See you
Keep
guys.
them peeled. Keep them peeled.
Bye everyone.